Hey, Future Lawyer. Welcome to the LSAT Simplified podcast presented by Hey Future Lawyer, where we talk about all things LSAT, law school admissions, and otherwise. If you want to check out our free LSAT course, go to heyfuturelawyer.com to sign up for a free account today. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Today is October 20th, 2025. I'm recording this today. It should be going out unless we hit some technical snafu. But today, we're just going to go through kind of an update episode on what's going on in the world of LSAT admissions. We'll start by looking at the volume summary for how many applicants there have been year to date. Last week, we talked about how there's a giant surge, and we're going to talk about what's going on there. Then we are going to break down which majors score the highest on the LSAT and which majors score the lowest. This is not some study. This is LSAC data. They just release it on a web page. So we're going to take a look at that, see what's up. It's kind of fun facts. Then we'll be going through a question on our different LSATs, different difficulties. Short answer, no, but long answer coming later. And then I have a bunch of emails, including a personal statement. Also, I got a thoughtful email on the student loan changes. So we're going to go through a bunch of stuff. But without further ado, let's get right into it with the current volume summary. And hold on. I was looking at that data page, and I think they may have turned off the summary of who scores what by major. So this is bad radio if so, but I put it in to my Google Chrome to pull it up, and it's giving me a member law school login. Ah, dang it. Okay, hold on. That's so annoying. So there's a report, and I did look at it not too long ago, but now I'm getting a screen that says for law school admissions staff only. That sucks. Hold on. Let me see if I can just Google it to find it. So LSAC summary, LSAT score by major, because I did have the URL. But now I'm looking at this one. Let's see what we got. Cool. So there's a PDF with it. The PDF sucks, though. I don't want that. I want the actual page. Did LSA see it? Was I not supposed to see that? Was that not meant to be public? I think that may not have meant to be public because, okay, shit. This is now going to be bad radio because I was so excited for this new report, but now yeah, I'll just show you guys what I'm seeing. So what I'm seeing on the LSAC website is this. It's telling me for law school admission staff only. Also, if you're not on video, you won't see this. It's if you're on audio. But what I'm seeing is I put in my URL, which I'll copy paste. And then when I hit enter, it sends me to this. It loads, but then it says, you need staff, which I'm obviously not staff. So I guess I was in their backend without intending to, which, whoops. Okay, I mean, let's just see if there's any other interesting data. So, that's such a bummer though. Anyway, they do have a page that you can access, which is the summary by major. And yeah, now I'm so annoyed that they don't have access to it. So we'll just start here. We'll do the numbers of these stuff after. But anyway, so as you can see, you know what? No, this doesn't have everything. This is just a screenshot of it. That's so annoying. Anyway, what you can see is they have the major is just A. It's like accounting majors. The average GPA is a 157. It's the median high LSAT, but that's what we care about. I don't care about means because that'll get messed up by outliers. So the median LSAT of a accounting major is a 157. On this page, which I will note is only accounting through art history because it's alphabetical and they got rid of the page with all of it. What you can see is that the highest one is aerospace, which is a 163. Archaeology also has a 163, which is cool. I will note they misspelled archaeology, I think, unless I'm dumb. They have it spelled A-R-C-H-E. I think it's A-R-C-H-A-E. Maybe there's multiple spellings of archaeology. I've always seen it spelled with an A, though. Anyway, that's not terribly important. And then art history has a 162. What is the lowest one on here? So the lowest one on here is a 149, which is animal sciences. Now, another thing you'll note if you're looking at this is that not all of these have substantial samples. For example, there were only 21 applicants that had an animal science major. There were only 5 that studied agronomy. I have no idea what agronomy is. It sounds agricultural, but I don't know. Whereas with the larger majors, like what's the biggest one on this page? There were 900 that applied with an accounting major. That's the biggest one. There's also uncategorized, but that's going to be all these random majors. So I don't really want to talk about that. Wow, that's so annoying. I was really excited for that. I was going to actually make a bunch of content based on that. That was one of my plans. So I found this page. But perhaps that was never meant to be public. Perhaps LSAC goofed and no one was supposed to see that. I do remember scrolling through it because the cool thing when I was on the actual page is that I could sort. Like, for example, you all can see right now that this is not something I can sort, but you could click on the various categories such as median high LSAT or number of applicants, and it would sort from high to low or low to high like you were in a spreadsheet. And it was cool because you could just look at the top 10 majors. which I did do because I played around with this. I think it was like math, physics, computer science, and then the lowest were like criminal justice. I think social work was down there. I don't know. And for what's worth, all of this is correlation causation. It is not that physics makes you better at the LSAT. It is that people that are really strict with rules and are very literal are good at physics. And that's also the skill set that is required for the LSAT. So when people say like, oh, you should study this because they get higher LSAT scores, I always push back against that because I think it's a lot more indicative of the type of people in a certain major than it is of how that major prepares you for the LSAT. Now, are there some majors that might make you better honed at the LSAT? I mean, maybe, but as far as picking a major, I would not consider LSAT preparation even slightly. The one that people do recommend is philosophy, and this is for the whole formal logic idea. But that's a premise that if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know I challenge because I don't really believe that there's much formal logic on the LSAT. There's, common sense logic, which is like, for example, the one that we always go back to is necessary or sufficient. And you could say that to go to the mall, I must get in my car. I got in my car, therefore I went to the mall. And that's confusing a necessary condition for a sufficient condition because maybe I get in my car to go somewhere else. Maybe I went to the grocery store. Maybe I went to the gym. So when you confuse it with the only place I can go is the mall, that's not what the first sentence said. What the first sentence says is to go to the mall, I must get in my car, but not that if I get in my car, I must go to the mall, which is where people often mess that up. But that's not some deep cut, crazy logic. That is simply common sense. And I know I sometimes sound elitist or rude when I say this, but like if that doesn't compute, give up now because it's just going to get harder. Anyway, so that's why I don't recommend philosophy. Yeah, I'm really bummed about this. That was going to be a fun segment. We're just going to like kind of shit on the low majors. And I'm really annoyed that they got rid of my stuff. Oh well, it is what it is. Can't really complain too much. It's just LSAC cleaned up their back end. Okay, well with that, let's just look at the volume summary of what's going on since we can't look at the major. So as you can see, LSAC updated their page to basically scare you all. As of October 19th, which is yesterday, they updated. Applicants are up 31.6% versus last year. Applications are up 27.0%. So what that means is if we have more applicants, but less applications comparatively, that means that people are applying to fewer schools. So even though there's more applicants, maybe the average person is applying to 9 schools as opposed to 10. My rough recommendation is to apply to 10-ish at minimum this cycle because things are going to be so weird with the increased volume as well as with the loan changes. I would be applying to like 20 just to give yourself options. Now, I know that's annoying and expensive, but you know what else is annoying and expensive? Not going to law school next year because you didn't give yourself enough options. So I would apply to 20 and further. Like if you're like, man, applying to 20 schools, it sounds like so much work. Please quit now. Like you guys got to realize the work you're getting into as a lawyer. If you think applying to another law school is a headache, oh my Lord, you are going to get killed. Anyway, so that's that. Applicants are up. Test takers are up, but less so. It's up 21%. So more people are taking the LSAT, but less so than applications. What that tells me is that there's a lot of people that are left over from last cycle that were not happy with their results. So they're not taking the LSAT again, or perhaps they already took the LSAT. And so while there are more people taking the LSAT, not compared to how many more applications there are. So a lot of these people are leftovers from last cycle. Compared to the 4-year average, applications are up 45%, which tracks. Last year was a big cycle, and we're up even more from that. So this 2026 current admission cycle is looking to be about the worst cycle ever. And yeah, first-time test takers are up 12%. So there's a lot of people retaking because that 12% compared to the overall test takers is 21%. Even though 12% sounds like an increase, compared to the baseline, which is 21%, that's actually a decrease. We have fewer first-time test takers relative to the pool. The actual pool is a lot of people that are retaking the test, which I think is because people are realizing how consequential the LSAT is, and they're being forced to realize it. The LSAT has always been consequential. It was always crazy to not get your best LSAT score and hence go to a lower tier school. But the consequences have changed to where you're not best LSAT score. Instead of being ripped off now, people are legitimately not getting into law school if they can't get like a 150. Now, in the past, you've been able to get into law schools with the high 140s, which is genuinely insane to me as someone who teaches the LSAT, because I would not trust someone in the high 140s to do my laundry, let alone be my lawyer. I kind of kid, but also not really, because just to slow down real quick and expand upon where that comes from, in the low 140s indicates one of two things, as I've touched on many times, which is one, a severe lack of work ethic, in that this is someone who gives up very easily. They don't study for more than a month or two. They don't sit with it. They don't really try. The other thing it indicates is intellectual deficiency. And this is always hard to say, but some of us are just not that smart. And the LSAT has people that are not that smart that take it. It's actually one of my frustrations with many other LSAT prep is some of them very start off as like, oh, you can do it. This test is so hard. You're so smart. And the reality is not everyone is smart. Not everyone hearing this is smart, and that's fine. But there is LSAT prep that will tell everyone they're smart. And it's like, well, that's not true because half of people are above average and half of them are below average. That is how averages work. So, if 1,000 people listen to this, are all 1,000 of them going to be intelligent individuals? Presumably not. Now, where I think this is hard is I think in our society, people will often conflate their intelligence with their self-worth. And that's unfortunate because your intelligence is largely determined based on genetics, to my understanding. It's also largely determined based on your early childhood experiences in terms of like how well you're cared for, your nutrition, stuff like that. And these are all things that you did not control. You were born into whatever family with whatever genetics randomly. You did not choose that. So it's very odd that people conflate their intelligence with their self-worth, but people do. And I think that's why hearing that perhaps they're not that smart is so harsh for folks. But I don't understand it because don't get me wrong, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I strive to be exceptional in the things I do. I don't consider myself to have exceptional intelligence. It's like I'm smart, I would say. I'm above average. I always did well in stuff. In terms of testing, like I wasn't gifted and talented and all that stuff. But I can think of so many people that I know that are smarter than I am. And it's very odd though, because I think people have a hard time acknowledging that and realizing that they're not a genius. And you don't have to be a genius to be exceptional. In fact, a lot of the quote unquote smartest people I know are not killing it. Because at least in our society, genius only takes you so far. You actually have to work hard at it. And if you told me that, like, I can bet on one person with either, even in big law, in like the legal career that's like the most prestigious, if you tell me someone has like a average IQ, but they hustle, they don't give up, they work hard, or I can take someone who has a 120 IQ, but they're kind of fragile, they don't take criticism well, they give up. I would take the average person because fundamentally, while intelligence is useful, it's not the most important. Grit is a lot more important than intelligence. Anyway, and that's the other thing the LSAT tests, because like while the LSAT does test intelligence, it also tests grit. And if you have grit, you will get to a good LSAT score. You cannot have grit and get a bad LSAT score. You cannot have really strong intelligence and get a bad LSAT score. And if you have both of them, you'll get a great LSAT score, like in the 170s. And if you have one of the two, you'll end up at least like in the 160s if you try hard. Which that is the other thing is people just don't try hard, is what I've come down to. Really learning on the test is like, and this I think goes for all things in life. People exaggerate their effort on all things. But I will tell you all, as someone who looks on Reddit, and I see the same things you do, people don't tell the truth about what they study. When you talk to your friends, they don't tell the truth about how much they study. It is so much worse than whatever you're thinking. Most people are just incredibly soft on themselves. And the amount of people that actually study every day for the LSAT is incredibly minimal. The amount of people who take 2 days off a week and then round up to they study 7 days a week is really high. And those people will say they're studying 7 days a week. They'll say they're studying 3 hours when maybe they're averaging 90 minutes a day, 4 days a week. And so people get these incredible misperceptions about what is required because the reality is it's not that hard. It's just that people are soft. People don't do what they say they do. And they lie to themselves and then they lie to you. And what this leads to is people have incredible misperceptions of what's required. And I had these misperceptions too, because up until recently, up until about a year ago, I had no data on what the people that studied with me were doing in terms of their effort. And now that I have the data, I will tell you, and it's why we're working on a guarantee program for what's worth. Because I always thought LSAT guarantees were kind of bullshit and fugazi, and it was a way of marketing and scamming people, honestly. Has always been my take on guarantees. But what I'm now realizing is that actually guarantees are pretty legit if people do the work. In fact, we're even considering like a win your money back. Like we're so confident in our program that if you study with us and you do what we tell you and you don't improve, we'll pay you. Which the whole idea with this is honestly just get more people to work with us because for what's worth, we do want more people to work with us. If you are listening and studying for the LSAT, come talk LSAT with us. But part of that's because we like one, we're self-interested. We do want to be bigger and we want to spread our way of doing LSAT. Two, we think we can help people. Like I know people are struggling doing it other ways and we can get them there. And part of that is telling you, here's what you need to do, go do it. Because a lot of people just don't do it. And there's this whole like, you're not okay, we're not okay, and that's okay, overly positive. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for positivity, but to a point. And there's a lot of what I would consider toxic positivity, which is telling people that they're fine, it doesn't matter, like you're doing so good. But that's not always true. And when you're telling people that and it's not true, you're not, it might sound nice, but long term, you're not being nice to them. You're covering up what needs to be said, which is that, hey, if you want these outcomes, you actually have to do the steps. And for what's worth, if you're listening, you're like, I want a 160, but I can't get it. I don't believe you. Like, you can. Are you going to work on it? Because if you are, why can't you get it? Like, seriously, what's stopping you? And often people have these mental blocks, and those mental blocks prevent them from ever studying. Like, oh, this test is bullshit, or I'm a bad test taker. And it's just not true. Like, I don't believe in bad test takers, as I've done more LSAT prep. And I know a lot of these things are also very contradictory to a lot of your guys' worldviews. But I often find that people hold these things without having thought through them. And they're just like, I'm a bad test taker. And in reality, it's like, oh, are you? Or did you never actually learn to do the skills on this test? Because if you're, bad at the skills, then no, you're not a bad test taker. You're just bad at the skills. Being bad at a test taker is being adequate and competent at the skills, but then falling apart under the test. And I would consider that more of an anxiety thing than being a bad test taker. But what I find is that most people that claim to be bad test takers just aren't good at the skills. And it's a lot easier to claim I'm a bad test taker than I'm not good at this. Anyway, it's odd though, because like people don't start good at things, but this kind of self-delusion I see as like the biggest reason people fail in life in general, especially at the LSAT, which is what I have the largest sample on. I mean, I can go into my takes on like the rest of the world, but no one's here for that. But specifically on the LSAT, it is purely self-perception. It is purely effort-based. There is almost nothing else. And that being said, there is other stuff because this is where people are like, well, Ben, what about people that had strong educational backgrounds? And the answer is like, yeah, of course, that's an advantage. The idea that going to good schools won't help you in terms of learning grammar and getting more repetition with reading. Because one of the things I'm now learning is that like no one reads. I genuinely don't understand how you can read a book and then score below like a 150. It doesn't make sense to me. If you're illiterate enough to read a book, you should be able to score 150. But I think what's happening is that people just don't read, period. And that not reading really bleeds into the LSAT, which is funny to me because you would think that people that want to be lawyers would be readers. Maybe not reading all the books. Like, I'll be honest, I don't read a ton, but I read. Like, I have books that I go through. If I had to ballpark how many a year, I don't know, like 50. And so, and maybe give or take 20. I definitely read more than 30. But either way, the point is like there are people that don't read, period. And then they're bad at the LSAT. And it's like, well, what do you expect? You don't like work this muscle. If you work this muscle, you'll get better at it. Anyway, so yeah, let's look at the volume summary. Either way, it's basically up though. So yeah, here we are. There have been 15,000 applicants year to date, which is a 31.6% increase. I don't recall what it was a week ago. I think it was a 33% increase. So it is technically slowing down. Still an increase though, because remember, this isn't, the increase of 33% to 31%, even though that's like quote unquote decreasing week over week, year over year, we're still shooting upwards. And this is with last year being the biggest cycle ever. So 2026 still looks to be the worst cycle ever, which means that if I were you all and I had not finished the LSAT yet, I would not be applying. I just can't imagine the pressure you're putting yourself in if you're taking the November LSAT in like 2 or 3 weeks, and that has to go well, or else you don't apply to law school. That sounds stressful. And in fact, it is normal to like have an anxiety bomb on test day if that's your plan, because your plan's awful. You put yourself in a really tough spot where you have to have everything aligned on test day. It's actually something that I've kind of worked on in terms of messaging is we're just trying to advertise less to people that are trying to get it done this cycle. Because it's hard because often I find that, I won't say we failed them, but we do fail to get them their best LSAT score in that time window, but not because we're doing a bad job, but just because giving yourself a month is so hard. I mean, the amount of people I hear from every time a test is coming up and they're like, oh, I want tutoring for the last 2 weeks. I'm just like, no, because I mean, honestly, for one, I don't really want to do tutoring for 2 weeks. Tutoring's not really worth my time. The only time I really do tutoring is if I know someone and they're like, let's do it for a while. Or alternatively, there's someone who's like been in class and they just want to do an hour to get through some roadblocks. But when someone reaches out to me, they're like, I want LSAT tutoring in 2 weeks. It's honestly a pretty bad fix because, well, I mean, here's the likely outcome. We meet, I do my best, I help explain a few things. They don't improve because this is someone who does not have their shit together. If they had their shit together, they wouldn't be doing tutoring in the last 2 weeks before the LSAT. So there's someone who's not likely to do the homework I assigned. There's someone who's not likely to do well. And then they don't improve that much because they just didn't have enough time to. And then further, they probably didn't do what I told them to. This is what happens when you help people out last minute. They're last minute people put in last minute effort. Then those last minute people don't get a good LSAT score because, as we talked about, they weren't prepared. The way you take the LSAT is you prepare and then you take it once you like your scores. But this is someone who did it backwards. They decided to take the test before they studied. And then, of course, taking the test is going to be difficult because they're not ready. Anyway, so they don't do well. Now they don't do well. And oftentimes they correlate that with like, I worked with Ben, I didn't get a good score, therefore it's Ben's fault. And so it creates bad word of mouth, which I don't need. Like if I want to work with someone, I want to work with someone who will help succeed. Second, they're not happy because they didn't like get the LSAT score they thought they paid for. Now, that's actually not what you're paying for when you're paying for tutoring. What you're paying for is advice. And that advice is very personal when you're paying for tutoring. It's like, hey, here's what I would do if I were you. Here's how you should get better. And that's useful. But it's not useful when there's no execution on that advice, which is what tends to happen when you have these last minute people. And anyway, so that's the long-term spiel on that. The basic gist of it is that if I were studying and I was not already scoring where I wanted to, I just don't see how you're going to get it done this cycle. So we have November, and November is in a couple weeks. You're not going to improve much before November. It's like literally 2 weeks away. And further, you all have 10-point ranges. I mean, the amount of lack of comprehension that you guys have on this is not, it's genuinely insane. If you think you are a 165, that is not possible. You do not have an LSAT score, you have an LSAT range. And according to LSAC data, because I did talk to LSAC about this, it is a plus or minus 4-point range. So if you're at 165, that means you could score as high as a 169 as low as a 161. But here's what actually happens. People tend to over-identify with the high end of the range. So people tend to say, like, oh, I'm a 165, when in reality, they're like a 161 plus or minus 4 points, which means they can score anywhere from a 157 to 165. That is normal. That doesn't mean that they're doing something wrong. That's exactly what's supposed to happen given LSAC data. Because the LSAT, on certain days you have a good day, on certain days you have a bad day, your 50-50s go the right way, they go the wrong way. Anyway, the point is that people tend to over-identify with the high point of the range, and this is where the test day drop comes from, because people who claim they're a 163 to 165, which does not exist, no one has a range that narrow, they go in, they score 159, and they're like, what happened? It was test day. I freaked out. There was a test day drop. And the reality is, no, there's no test day drop. You just thought that you had data where you didn't, because no one has a 3-point range. But then when they don't see that score in their 3-point range, it's lower. They're like, oh my God, I did worse on the test. And the reality is, no, you actually didn't. You did within statistical error. It's just that you lied to yourself in your preparation. You were not confident, or not confident, but you were not adequately treating this test as what it is, which is that there's ranges. So if you don't think you have a 9-point range, you are wrong. Literally everyone has a 9-point range unless you have mastered the test and you just like crank out 180s. Anyway, I just find that funny because people just do not comprehend that. And this is where taking November is so tricky, because if you take November and you score that 157, which is very possible for someone who's capable of a 165, now you have to either wait till January, at which point you could score another 157. It's not likely, but it could happen again. Or you're applying later. So anyway, the point is that you want to give yourself multiple bites at the apple because of score variance. And further, it also takes off the pressure, because the pressure you have when you have to crush November, it sucks. And so with all this, we as a company have decided that we are going to market more towards people that are studying for next fall, because those are people that we can help. And fundamentally, I care about helping people. I don't want to give people what they want. There's a lot of LSAT prep that'll give you what you want in terms of like formal logic. And for what's worth, I don't know, some of you want that. I don't know why you guys want that. It is so much harder. They'll give you like all this nonsense that you can take flashcards on. Which also, some people unironically study for the LSAT using flashcards. It's to me, it's so absurd. Like if you heard that and you're like, I study with flashcards, you got to rethink how you're prepping. This is not a test of content. In fact, sometimes it's really funny. I'll see people studying question types based on flashcards, where they'll look at a question. And it's like, which of the following if true weakens the argument? And then on the other side, it'll say weaken question. And it's like, well, yeah, that's a weaken question. That's what they asked you to do. And question types are all understandable if you just read the words in English, which you all should be capable of. So it's funny because people actually study with flashcards, and it's like, well, that's literally not how you study for the test. This is a skills-based test of answering questions, not identifying questions. If you can't identify questions on day one, you just don't have the reading comprehension to do this test. Is why I get so frustrated when people say they need like foundational knowledge. It's like, what foundational knowledge? You mean reading English? Are you not there already? Because if you're not, oh my Lord, has our educational system fallen? But I mean, it has. Don't get me wrong. Like, illiteracy crisis is real. I talk to people who are functionally illiterate all the time. It's really sad, actually, because the other thing is no one thinks they are the illiterate one, and it's also hard. How do you tell someone they're illiterate? Like, I know you're like, well, you just tell them, and you can't in email for what's worth, because if you write an email, remember these people are functionally illiterate, so they're not going to read the email and get it. And further, it's also tough to say because how do you tell someone like, hey, you don't understand. You don't understand words. You can't read. Like, that's not something nice you say to someone, but it is often what people need to hear, because like if you are below like a 150, I would consider that functional illiteracy. You are not separating the ideas from the words. And the whole point of, like, of course you can recognize the words. Like if you look at a word and it says D-O-G, you can pronounce dog. Like that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if they say like the dog ran, my grandma needs a pet that she can catch, what must be true? Or this dog is really speedy, my grandma needs a pet that is really calm. And like, what is most strongly supported by that? Well, the dog is not good for grandma, because grandma needs a chill pet, maybe a cat or something that'll just sit there like a fish. And this dog is speedy and it'll run. And the amount of people that'll just look at you and be like, it's a dog. And be like, well, yeah, duh, it's a dog. Like we got that. It said dog, but there was more there. There were ideas behind it. And that separation of the ideas versus the text is what the LSAT is testing. And if you cannot do that on the easy questions, that indicates illiteracy, which always sounds harsh to say, but that is what it is. If you can't get the easy ones right, you are functionally illiterate. And it's hard because no one thinks that's them, but it is. And I talk to these people, and I talk to people who they do the first 10 questions on logical reasoning, and they get 7 of them wrong. And they're asking me about question types. And I'm like, you can't read. And I don't know how to say that otherwise, but it's like, you need to stop. You need to actually understand, because you don't understand shit. And it's harsh because like no one else is telling them this. And then they go elsewhere and other LSAT prep will say, oh, you don't understand like this foundational knowledge. And it's like, that might be true. They probably don't understand this foundational knowledge. But upstream of that, the problem we need to fix before we get to all this crap is that they can't read, and you need to fix them. And anyways, these people also heavily correlate with people trying to do it last minute. people that are trying to study in like 6 weeks, which is crazy because they're the least likely to get it done in 6 weeks. There are occasionally people that can study in 6 weeks, not very common, but it does happen. But those are never the people that come in with a 135. Those are people that come in with like a 160 and are like, oh, I mean, I'm pretty good at this. I just need to like hone up my skills. That's kind of how I was. For what's worth, my diagnostic was a 151. This was back with logic games. Without logic games, I think my diagnostic would have been like a 160. And it's for what's worth, logic games is the section of the task they removed. It was really hard. Everyone bombed it up front. I did not bomb logical reasoning and reading comp, but I did bomb logic games because everyone bombed logic games. Anyway, the point is that I don't know what the point was. So yeah, I mean, basically we're just trying not to market those people, not because I don't want to help them. Like if they come to us and they pay us, I will not turn anyone away. I will help any, well, that's not true. I will turn people away if I genuinely cannot help them at all. And it's like, this is a lost cause. For what's worth, that also does not win friends and influence people. People hate that when you say, I can't help you. But also, I think it's what they need to hear. Although maybe I'm not doing them any services because they probably just go to some other LSAT person who will take their money and sell them dreams. But I just have such a hard time with that. I don't know. And for what's worth, I have a pretty high bar for turning someone away. Like it has to be genuinely hopeless because there are people that I've been concerned about, and then I see them make progress. And maybe it's not the progress I want to see, but like I've seen people start in the 120s and make it to the 150s. I've seen dozens of people go from the 130s to the 160s. It can happen, and it does take more effort. But what's common of all these people is they realized what had to be fixed, which is that they were not reading critically to the level they needed to. And when they fixed it, their scores went up. And do people have different ceilings? Can everyone get to a 170? Perhaps not. But can everyone get to a 160? Yeah, I would say so. And this is something that is not popular in the world of LSAT and the world of law school admissions because there's a lot of people that don't have a 160. And now I've just put it back in their court. And I've said, this is actually on you if you didn't score 160. It's not this test is bullshit. It's not some like oppression that's happening. It's that you didn't do what could have been done. And it's easier to point to systems and to point to other things and say, this is not my fault. But the reality is, if you didn't get to 160, that is your fault. And that's not saying that you're bad, because for what's worth, maybe you don't need a 160. We were talking about my friend, former student. I would consider a friend. We're friendly. She was fun to have in class. And she went to the University of Akron, or not went to, she got into Akron this cycle with a 90% scholarship. And she had a 158. But also, a lot of this was very situational dependent. She didn't need a higher score because for the only school she could go to, given her geographical limitations, a 158 was above median. The only schools she was looking at were Akron and Cleveland State, which I both believe had pretty low medians. Anyway, my whole point with this is that whether or not you get a 160 is a choice. And you can make that choice. And I'm not here to judge you for your choices because I like genuinely don't care what happens in your life. I mean, that's hyperbolic because I do care. I want everyone to live a fulfilling, happy life. I want you to like have friends and family and all that good things that we all want. But as far as like your actual consequences of if you're going to be in debt and if you're going to like deal with that, that is genuinely your problem. I don't live with it. You live with it. And the thing is, I've also become detached because I know every year there are going to be dozens of people that listen to me and I change their life for a very positive way. And not me changing your life. I'm just giving you a PSA and then you're listening. Like, I'm not saying that I'm like some like messiah or anything. I'm just putting information out there and you guys run with it. I also know there's a lot of people that will completely discard it and ignore everything I said. And that used to really bother me because, well, for one, it's genuine consequences. People genuinely ruin their lives, largely speaking, because people, I think, don't understand the gravity of putting yourself in these financial straits. To have $350,000 of debt and not be able to make the money, it's hard. I mean, you're going to be underwater forever just paying your interest, let alone paying down the principal of that debt. Like when you get your check, there will be no money left over because it all goes to interest. And you're not even paying off your debt. You're just keeping it from going up. Maybe if you're lucky. It's like, then how do you pay for your rent? How do you pay for your groceries? How do you have fun on the weekends going out with your friends? How, like just going out to dinner for $50? It becomes impossible because you put yourself in a financial situation where you can't do that. And so it's hard because like I genuinely do want to help people. I think it's actually funny. I don't know that I'm always perceived that way by a lot of folks. I think for like my loyal listeners, you guys get where I'm coming from. But you know, in a lot of people's minds, the big bad wolf of LSAT prep. And anyway, the whole point here is that you guys have a lot more power over your lives than you do. And there's a lot of people that really hate that idea because it's so much easier to blame things on others or systems. And it's not something I believe in. I think you guys have the power. And it's funny that people react negatively to that because is that not the most empowering thing in the world to realize that you have power over your future, that you control your LSAT score, that if you want to go to an elite law school, you can. Like I'm talking to you, whoever's listening. Do you want to go to a T14? I guess if you have a really bad GPA, I can't help you. But if you're like, I have a 3.5 and I'm willing to grind at the LSAT and figure it out, you can go to a T14. You have a 3.4, probably. Like you can probably figure it out. So I don't know why this is seen as like disempowering. And I think it's disempowering for the people that don't want to do the work. Because I'm saying, oh yeah, you actually can have whatever you want, but you have to do the work. And you don't get to say your failure was not your fault. You actually have to own your failure, which is true of all things. Like, you know, look at life is full of failure. I failed in most things I've done because that's how life works. You know, you're going to see failure. That's just part of life. But does it help me to go back and blame it on people? I don't think it does. I think it's a lot better to just say, like, yeah, that is what it is. And like, if I, like, for example, my first year of college, I got a 2.7 in chemistry. I was studying at Chapman University in California, and I didn't take school seriously. I didn't study like I should have. I thought I was, but I wasn't. I wasn't taking it very seriously. I didn't prep like I should have. I didn't take it seriously. I wasn't treating school like a part-time job. I was treating it like vacation, which a lot of kids do, but they're more excited to be on campus with their friends and, to do all the fun stuff as opposed to going to class and taking it seriously. And I got a 2.7. And in hindsight, I can look back and say, like, oh, my professor was bullshit. And one of my professors sucked. I did hate one of my professors. But the reason I didn't get a good grade in her class was not because she sucked. It was because I didn't go to lecture and I didn't study. And it's like, I don't know. It's so odd that people will look for the thing. Because, like, two things can be true at once. I don't love that person as a professor. Also, it was completely my fault. It was not her fault at all why I didn't get a good grade. And anyway, it's funny, though, because a lot of people will, and for what it's worth, probably not the people listening. Because if you're listening and, like, being told that personal responsibility actually is a huge impact in your life, I think people would just tune out. But like it is, like I don't know. I really hate the whole like the systems keep you down because like are there bad systems? Sure. Like I mean, I talk about a bad system literally all day every day. Law school admissions, it's a broken system. So I'm not someone here to say like, oh, systems are great and there's no traps. There are traps. What I'm saying is the traps are largely avoidable, and that for most people, because like of course you can point to edge cases and be like, oh, hey Ben, here's someone whose like life was obviously fucked and they could not have escaped it. And it's like, yeah, of course those people exist, but outliers do not disprove rules. And the reality is that you all have a lot more control over your future than anyone else. Anyway, so that's the the admissions data. It looks like it's going to still be a bad cycle. I mean, the short update with a lot of Ben's philosophy jammed in there is that, this upcoming cycle is going to be intense. There's going to be a lot more stuff happening. If you want to apply, I'm rooting for you. I always root for everyone because I want to see you succeed. At the same time, I do want to caveat that with if it were me and if it were someone that I was advising, I would tell you that if I didn't have my LSAT score in hand, I would probably just apply next cycle because it's going to be so bad. And I will also note, because I didn't touch on this yet, but next cycle looks and this is very early data, but usually we talk to a lot of people in October and November and September that are starting to study. There's been a lot fewer of those people. So while there are a lot of people taking the LSAT, it's a lot of people that are kind of finishing their LSAT prep or are studying and are now taking it. There's not a ton of people starting. Not to say there aren't people starting, but the number year over year has really gone down. And I think part of that has to do with people are seeing how competitive it is and it's discouraging. So a lot of people are just deciding not to even try. So I perceive next year will be down from this year. I will also say that we are really far out, and to make any prediction is a great way to get egg on my face because I have no idea what's going to happen a year from now. But from the very few leading indicators I do have, it does feel like next cycle is going to be easier. Now, I could be completely wrong. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I just want to throw that out there. I see fewer people starting to study for the LSAT, a lot of people continuing to study and maybe giving it more seriousness than they did in past cycles, but the number of new people like starting prep has been lower. Okay, so with that, I did want to quick touch on one quick little thing that I see constantly pop up. Although, where did this go? It was basically a post on Reddit, and it said, is prep test 141 easier than others? I don't have the post in front of me, but we can just answer the question because I basically recall it. And the short answer is no. You all love to think that certain tests are harder, certain tests are easier, certain tests are more representative. The LSAT is the LSAT. And are there slight minutia? Sure, but that's why you take multiple tests. That's why you prep with a bunch. And are there ones that will better connect with your brain? Maybe get reading comp passages that you find personally fascinating. So you find yourself actually interested, actually digesting, and as such, actually answering all the questions accurately. And if you really love what they were talking about, that's easier than if it's something you hate. But that will all get smoothed out. So when people ask, like, is this test easier? Is this test harder? The short answer is basically always no. And occasionally, yes, there are ones that have more people get more questions right. But LSAC accounts for this. They make it so that you can miss fewer questions to get a high score. And as such, if it is quote unquote easier, they account for that in the scale. So your scaled score on 120 to 180 is basically always equivalent to other scaled scores on that 120 to 180 scale, with the caveat that there's error. They acknowledge that your score can go plus or minus 4 points. You have a 9-point range. So the short answer is there's no functional difference in terms of actually noticing. Subjectively, they might feel easier or harder depending on your personal strengths, whether it be there's certain topics they're talking about, like you really love, I don't know, animals, and there's a reading comp on physics, that might hurt you because maybe if it was about biology, you'd crush it, but on physics, that one's now hard. So like, are there these subjective slight differences? Sure. Are there objective differences between prep test 101 through prep test 158? The answer is no. The only difference, well, there's two differences that actually exist. And these are style differences, not difficulty differences. On old logical reasoning passages, they used to have one passage and then 2 questions off of it. So often they would give you a question and ask you like, what's the conclusion? And then like, what would weaken it or something like that. That used to exist, that no longer exists. Also, comparative reading became a thing. This is on reading comp. They have two passages, passage A and passage B, and they kind of relate to the same topic. And then they'll ask you questions about the two passages, how they relate, how they're different, all that good stuff. That only became a thing about halfway through the LSAT. And anyway, all the points, those are the only real differences. And those aren't difficult differences, those are style differences. Okie dokie. Well, let's get through a few emails. I have some thoughtful ones and some fun ones. I do want to start with one from an LSAT person that I have in class who watches the podcast, as most people that write into the podcast do. It would be weird for someone to not watch the podcast yet write in. But yeah, they wrote in, and this is regarding student loan changes. And they had an interesting take, which I just want to kind of put out there, partly because I thought it was, well thought out. And then further, I just want to give my brief reactions because it's my show and I get to do what I want. But they said, hello, Ben. And then they get right into the meat of it. There's no, I hope you're doing well. How was your Tuesday? Are you well? I am well. Thank you for asking, even though you didn't. How rude. I'm kidding. I always tell people not to ask. But anyway, they say, I was watching the podcast episode today. I was thinking about your take on the changes to the loan system. So when did they send this? They sent this back in September 29th. So that was about a month ago. I don't know what episode that was, but either way, it's about my student loan changes. My short take is that it's a good change because it's starving bad law schools. Good law schools and good students will still have good financing options. And this will cause schools to shut down because they will no longer have the money. The very bottom schools, that is. So just that was the very quick recap of my position. If you want to hear me expand on those positions, just scroll back. There's lots of episodes on it. But I just wanted to quickly reiterate that. They continue. As you said before, it is likely that the effect on the schools will be incremental as current fall 2025 students and other previous years are grandfathered into the previous loan system. Yeah, that's true. I'd imagine that as the effects on schools/students become more and more apparent, there will be a huge amount of backlash from the schools and Democrat sphere. I agree that the schools will backlash. I don't know that the Democrats and left wing will. I say this as someone who is not the most into the political world. I don't listen to that much political stuff. I don't really consume it. Not that I don't care, but I find a lot of people are much more in this world than I am. I just kind of try to focus on my world, which is law school admission. This is my world. I love this. It is so fun. And I would encourage all of you to find something. Now, not saying don't be informed, but anyway, I guess my initial take is I'm not sure that the Democrats will be backlashed against this. I mean, I guess they will, because I think it's part of the Democratic Party platform that education is really good and that the student loan changes are big bad orange man, as opposed to maybe rejiggering the incentives. Anyway, if it's just pure opposition to Trump, then sure. I think it's tricky, and maybe it's just because I want to give them more credit than that, and I think that they're smarter than just being single. Maybe they're not. Maybe the parties are so fucked and the two-party system is just so broken. But my inclination is can't they see that these schools are ripping off? One of the things the Democrats are all about is, or at least to my understanding, because I'm hot water here, definitely not trying to step on any rakes. The Democrats, to my understanding, are very about first-gen people, minorities, making sure that they're not taken advantage of by systems. And I cannot see a better case study of systems absolutely fucking minorities and first-gen people than the law school system. Because what it does is it convinces them that these bottom-tier law schools are good. They take out absurd debt to pay these schools because they're just excited to go to law school. They don't know better. They don't have family members telling them the actual reality because they don't know, largely speaking. And then they basically get indebted to these schools forever. And on the back end, they have this JD that is actually not worth much in terms of salary. So it's funny because, and maybe all of this gets eclipsed by the fact that they're so focused on educational equity or something that they completely disregard the effect. But what I see is the effects are something that the Democrats would presumably really dislike. I mean, I would argue any rational person should really dislike them. Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Green Party, etc. Anyway, but okay, sure. Yeah, the schools would definitely be backlash, and maybe they're able to twist this because you can twist it. And certainly, I think it's why people have such negative reactions to my takes on it. It's because they view it as a political take. I don't think my student loan changes are that political. I mean, maybe it's inherently political. Taking a stance on it is political in a sense. But I don't come at it from a left-right perspective. I just come at it from I understand the system really well. The system's fucked because it basically scams people to go to these bottom-tier schools that charge insane amounts of money for really bad job outcomes. I don't think that should be a left-right thing to want to change that. And is the change perfect that they made? I don't know. I don't know that it is. Is it better than the status quo of just letting the schools rip people off to unlimited amounts via the federal government? I certainly think it's an improvement. So anyway, okay, sure. Let's just assume that the Democrats push back against it. Because I think your argument does predicate upon that. They continue. Likely it will be something that the Democratic Party campaigns on during the next election cycle. Maybe, though I feel like maybe people will forget about this. Outside of the law school admissions world, how many people are still talking about the student loan changes? I feel like there's so much bigger political stuff, whether it's immigration, abortion stuff, what else? Foreign policy. And it's not that people don't care about this, but I feel like it's very overshadowed. So is this really going to be the talking point of the 2026 midterms? I doubt it. I mean, could it become like the rallying cry? Maybe. And maybe if there's a ton of young people that get shut out of graduate school or like undergrad because of this, it could be a thing. But excluding those effects, I don't know that like it's that mobilizing. And I'm not trying to like nitpick. I'm just like trying to really think this out. They continue wanting to bring back education to America or something like that. It's highly likely that if the Democrats win, the current change to the loan system would be reversed. I'll have to take your word for that. My understanding is that Congress doesn't do anything. Like even if the Democrats have the will for it, the will versus actually doing it are two separate things. To my understanding, it's why Congress or the president often doesn't do what they say they'll do. It's not even that they don't want to. It's that like saying something versus doing something is very different. But okay, sure, maybe they would. Maybe they would reverse that. They continue. As such, I believe that many schools will do as much as possible to keep the doors open long enough for such a change to take place. Yeah, basically the argument that like maybe this will get fixed, and by fixed, I mean broken again and taken back to the broken system that did exist. But if they can say we don't have to survive forever, we just have to survive for a year or two, and then when the Democratic Congress gets back in power, which presumably they eventually will, because that's how the pendulum of politics goes, then they'll undo what the Donald has done in the one big beautiful bill with student loan change. I mean, maybe it's certainly possible. I don't know, like, because here's the thing: will this take 10 years? Because the schools cannot survive 10 years of this. Can they survive a year or two, perhaps? So I guess if you're right, and the midterms do swing things back, and maybe the schools, this is like their last hope, where it's like whether or not it's even realistic, it's just what they have to hope for. They just have to really pray that this is what occurs so that they can save their system. Because outside of this help from the government, I don't see how they'll survive. At least, this is referring to the very bottom tier schools. Of course, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, they're going to be fine. Many other schools are also going to be fine. But these kind of standalone law schools that are really weak and have really bad employment outcomes, they're in trouble, like the Cal Westerns of the world. Okay, though, I hear your point, though. They continue. They won't want to shut down the huge cash flow that law schools bring on something that may be a temporary change to the loan structure, as the cost for closing/reopening would be extremely high. That is true. The cost of a law school shutting down and then reopening in the future is extremely high. There's a ton of inertia is a very powerful force in this world. An object in motion tends to stay in motion, an object at rest tends to stay at rest. This applies to almost all things in life. It is from physics for what it's worth, but it's a concept in life that I really believe in. Like for what's worth, starting a podcast, not easy. I put it off for years. Keeping a podcast going, posting once a week, not hard. You just keep doing it. So yeah, I mean, inertia is powerful, and the law schools know that, and as such, they probably will try to stay in business. I guess what I challenge is how likely is it that the Democrats are, for one, they have to win, and then second, they actually have to pass these bills. And whether or not they have a giant win in 2026, I actually don't know what the odds are, because like I said, I don't follow it terribly tightly. Presumably, the party out of power tends to do pretty well in the midterms. That's my understanding. Of course, there can be exceptions, but I guess under those conventional wisdom, then yeah, you would expect them to win in 2026. Will they win 2028? So there won't be an incumbent because Trump shouldn't be able to run. I mean, it would be his third. I know there's been rumblings about that. Hopefully, for our sake, that's not a situation. Just because, three presidents, no bueno. Anyway, or three-term presidents, no bueno. But yeah, I don't know. I guess the question is how there's a lot of things that have to go right here, which is one, the Democrats have to win. Two, they have to actually undo the things. And then the law schools can survive. I don't know. Like, it's certainly a possibility, and it's certainly something that I think they're looking out for. I don't know that this will save the system, though. For what's worth, by save the system, I mean save the broken system. This system's fucked. Like, it is awful. I'm so glad that the Republicans did what they did with the bill. And do not clip this out of context. I'm taking a stance on law school admissions. I don't know. As I've iterated many times in emails to our stupider listeners, I don't know what else was in the bill because I am not a congressional expert. I am a law school admissions expert, law school admissions dork. And speaking in the purview of law school admissions, it was a very good change because it took away the ability to scam people. And if you're one of those people that's going to get scammed, I know this doesn't sound good because what you saw is you just saw the ladder get pulled up from under you. But what I'm telling you is that ladder was not real. That ladder was going to fuck you. That ladder was going to put you in crazy debt and you're never going to pay it off. Because the reality is, if you are a good bet for law school, there is still going to be options for you. I don't know what they are yet because it hasn't really got around to the financing yet for next year. But come next summer, we'll know what things look like very well. Anyway, but they continue. I suppose the question is how long the schools can last. That is the question. So you're hitting on a good point where I was kind of assuming they don't have cash on hand, but the situation in different schools will be different. Some can survive a year, some can survive 10 years. And as such, they have different runways. Because if you only have a year and you rely on this money every year being refreshed, then those schools are real deep shit. We looked at Cal Western's balance sheet, which was about, I think they have like 80 million in assets, and they have an operating budget of like 40 million a year. And so they theoretically have 2 years of assets that they can burn, assuming no tuition is incoming, which is not true because they still get a lot of their tuition. They get 2/3 of their tuition. So will that many really go out of business in the next year? Probably not. But I think in the 5-year window, we're looking at a really bad situation. Anyway, they continue. A possibility for some schools, but not all, is to integrate the cash flow from student living expenses to the schools. So yeah, what would that be, like dorms for the kids? But then they have to pay for that. So now you have all these expenses. So sure, you're bringing in more revenue, but you also have to now house the kids and feed them. And that's like, even if you're capturing the like living expenses, you're now spending a ton more money. So I don't know that that's too much of a solution. I take your point though. Like I get what you're saying, which is that maybe they can capture 50K, not 50K, 25K in living expenses, but only spend 10K. But compared to what they were collecting, this is picking up pennies. They were picking up 70K in free cash flow from the federal government. Now they're having to like rejigger just to maybe get 10K in net profit captured. It's tricky. Anyway, they continue. Even if they lower the cost below what they currently charge, it's likely they can get the bulk of the $50,000 federal loan amount pursued this way. Yeah, if they do all their living expenses, I just don't know how feasible that is. They continue, it will be less than what they were getting before, but this might allow more schools that already have the infrastructure to lighten the burden from the loan changes. Yeah, it's true, because like Harvard, for example, has law dorms that you can live in. Overall, though, like I think it's interesting points. I do think there's probably a lot of schools that are hoping for this to all blow over. I don't think it will, but if it does, then yeah, the system goes back to what it was. It goes back to fucking people, and we have no positive change. Now, as you can all tell, I'm not a fan of that. I hate the system as it existed. I think the current system is probably better. Is the current system good? I mean, I don't know. We haven't really seen it play out, so I'd be speaking out of turn to say I know exactly what's going to happen. But taking away the ability to scam people is a net positive change, period, in my mind. And are there going to be second and third order effects? Like, sure, but they would have to be really bad for it to be worse than what was already happening. So I'm not saying this is perfect. What I am saying is that the system as it was pretty bad. So really any change, it's pretty hard for it not to be a positive change. Okay. What else do we have? Well, we have a bunch in the queue, but there's one that I promised I would put someone out for, which was personal statement advice from a lawyer. So I just wanted to touch on it. Basically, they said, hey, I have a lawyer. I'm not sure if you said it was your boss or a friend or something, but a lawyer and you gave them a draft of your personal statement and they gave you advice, some of which I think was positive, others was negative. So we're just going to go through this personal statement as well as the advice and talk about what advice was good. Okay. So let's actually read the personal statement first because that will inform the feedback that the lawyer gives. And I will roughly anonymize it as much as possible so that no one can identify you. Okay. So it's a personal statement. Quick note, the heading is good. It is 2 pages, double spaced, short paragraphs. This looks nice from a first glance. I haven't read it, of course, but overall, as far as style points, you win. Okay, so let's see what we got, starting with, I will note the font in your header is different from the font in your body. I don't know if that's because you downloaded it and sent it to me as a docx, I think. But anyway, if you're going to submit ones in the future for everyone, please submit PDFs. They're easier to read. But also, that's a nitpicky thing as far as stylistic stuff goes. So let's read it. It took just one word to change the atmosphere in a room, : RIF. I think that, so colon means equal sign, and I think the word is what equals, not the room ... RIF. I think it's the word. I mean, maybe that's grammatically correct, but I would grammarly check that, just make sure it's correct. I don't know if that's a proper use of a colon. Either way, though, what do we know? Well, it took a word to change the atmosphere in the room. It's RIF. It's very artsy. I know nothing about you. It's short, though, so I'm at least open to it. I don't hate this opening, but I do want to quickly learn about you, and thus far, we have not learned about you. Let's continue. The announcement of a reduction in force at the Department of Health and Human Services turned an ordinary Monday morning meeting into one filled with tension and uncertainty. All right, so you are presumably working at Health and Human Services, and further, people are being laid off. Reduction. Oh, that's what RIF means. Reduction in force. Okay, cool. I thought it meant like something infrared. Like that's RFI that I was thinking of, which is infrared technology. But okay, no, this is like firing people. Yeah, so okay, you're gonna get fired. Not the story I love, but it could work. Let's see. While waiting for further updates at my desk, I began preparing my presentation on the congressional appropriations process. All right, so you're making a presentation, and you work at this department. Cool. I mean, I don't hate it. I see you as like a federal worker, which that is a general positive thing. It means you have experience, and that should go over well. They continue. I was slated to present this information in front of the leadership and staff in a few weeks. I would rephrase that so you're more active, but sure. So there was no time to waste. I would cut this so there was no time to waste. That's redundant, but anyway, they continue. However, I did not get far into my assignment before my team received bad news. My cohort of interns and I had our positions paused indefinitely. I will clarify, are you an intern here or are you overseeing interns? Because if you are an intern, that's fine, but I would try not to mention it because it's not lying, but you can frame facts differently, which is what lawyers do, by the way. You don't have to tell them you're an intern. You can just talk about working there, and whether or not it's a full-time employment or an internship, they don't need to know that. I would prefer them picturing it as full-time. Like, don't lie about it, but you can allow them to make their own conclusions that may or may not be correct. And I prefer for you not to mention it's an internship because now I'm picturing you as an intern, which just like takes the power out of this story. I'm like, oh, like your little internship program got cut. Well, yeah, I know it sucks, but it's less powerful than like, you got laid off. And for what's worth, do not lie. I'm not saying a lie. What I am saying is you can choose to portray facts in a way that makes you seem more awesome. And for what's worth, especially if you aren't an intern, definitely clarify that because I'm now thinking of you as an intern. Although, paused, we're one paragraph in, what have we learned? You got fired. Is that a positive story? Generally, no. Like, I want to see you kicking ass. I don't want to see you getting fired. So the writing was decent, but I also don't love this as a story. Let's continue. The following day's discussion with my team and colleagues left me with more questions than answers. Yeah, I mean, that's probably true, but okay. So, in particular, the timeline of these RIF decisions and the number of employee layoffs were still unknown. So it's unclear who's getting laid off and how many. Eventually, I found myself unable to sit idly in my apartment while anticipating a positive update that may never come. So I decided to continue what started. So you're going to finish your project, I guess, your presentation. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I like that you're like a hard worker. I don't love the exposition. That second paragraph felt largely unnecessary, but it's also not bad. It's just, I don't love it. They continue. I began by delving into the Federal Appropriations Act, agency initiatives, and congressional justifications for various fiscal years. Cool. Love that. Then I tied the current initiatives back to their congressional authority as I combed through hundreds of pages of text. What started as a way to sorry, I just short-circuited. What started as a way to stay busy quickly became a fascination with the legal frameworks that made government possible. That feels very abstract. I would say concrete there. Moments before shutting down my laptop and preparing for the weekend, I glanced at an email from the department. A smile spread across my face. I was officially cleared to resume my work. So you didn't get fired, which makes me wonder why you even mention getting fired. Because I thought you were going to get fired. Now you didn't, which is good. I'm glad you didn't. But it seems, I don't know. I mean, I don't hate it because what the story says about you is that you're going to keep working. You're a hard worker. And whether or not you were like on pause or not, it's not going to stop you from doing what needs to be done. I like that. So you know what? I guess I've talked myself into keeping the story. I don't know that it's your best story, but I don't hate it. Then continue. I arrived at the Monday morning meeting with my presentation nearly complete. Glad to have you back, but I hope you know they won't be paying for you these past few days, my supervisor joked. I chuckled and replied, that's what I assume. Yeah, I like that. Like, it's showing you as a hard worker. What it says about you is good. Is this like a full picture of who this person is? Of course not, because it's one story. But the story I'm getting left with is very positive, which is this is someone who does what needs to be done. They are a hard worker, and just because they're, on leave or whatnot, doesn't mean they're going to stop. They kept their work going. So I like that. They continue. Despite the good news, this meeting also brought a sobering realization that most of my cohort had lost their positions, which I actually like that. And here's why. You didn't. They chose to keep you. So while everyone else got cut, they chose not to cut you, which says positive things about you. So, and here's what I also like. You're not saying that. I am getting that via my own thinking through this because I'm like, oh, they kept this person. Everyone else got fired. Why did they keep this person? And you didn't tell me they kept me because I'm so much awesome. My other teammates, fucked off while we were at our job. You didn't say that. I just inferred that you were the most serious, you were the most competent, and that's why they kept you. This is what I mean by showing and not telling. This person's doing a great job of showing and not telling. I'm getting to my own conclusions. They're not saying I keep working hard, I take things seriously. I'm getting to that on my own. So I love, this is a great example of show, don't tell. Anyway, they continue. Over the coming months, I reached out to connect with my colleagues. I don't know that I'd include that. I feel like they can just be dead to you. I mean, it's a little harsh, but I don't know. They got fired. It is what it is. They continue. I went from inquiring about their projects in the conference room to learning about their favorite arepas at the local Colombian restaurant. Yeah, that feels like artsiness for the sake of artsiness. I don't see the point of you met up with them for lunch. Whether you met up with them at Cava or Chipotle or the local Colombian restaurant kind of is irrelevant to me. It's I don't care. They continue. I thoroughly enjoyed these interactions. I don't care, but I noticed a recurring topic among those still at the department. To many, these legal frameworks felt complicated and detached from their work. All right, so this is the transition to law. I mean, what even are these legal frameworks? I'm now confused. So cut the whole idea about reconnecting with your coworkers, and instead let's talk about what these legal frameworks are and why that's compelling you to law school. I don't love the whole wide law largely, but a short transition at the end is fine. And in fact, I would say probably good if it's not clear. Although to be fair, working at the Department of Health and Human Services and then going to law school, I don't know that you really need to explain law school. You're a government bureaucrat, or at least you were briefly, and now you're going to law school. That's very normal. You don't have to say oh, here's why I need to go to law school. You don't have to convince them. They're on your team. If you have the numbers to back this up, they're going to want you. Anyway, they continue. I promptly incorporated these insights from research and relationships into my presentation. When the time to present finally arrived, the hour-long time slot felt far too short. So yeah, you worked really hard on this presentation. I would talk more about what it was. You kind of mentioned this presentation, but like, what is it? What was the purpose here? What were you accomplishing? Who assigned it? I feel like I'm not sure what the presentation was, so I would cut the whole like reconnection and talk more about what the presentation was. Then continue. The dialogue was lively and the feedback was even better. Yeah, don't talk about that. I want to know more about what it was. It was especially gratifying to hear that many had gained a better understanding of the legal processes behind their work, which cool. But I want to know more about what it was. Like, was this explaining the legal processes behind what you guys do at this department? If so, talk about that and talk about what you discovered and like what you found and why this really intrigued you in law. That is good. They continue. Even as my role hung in the balance, this experience only deepened my conviction to study law. I witnessed firsthand how administrative regulations can feel inaccessible, even to those directly affected by them. What began as uncertainty in that Monday morning meeting has become a clear purpose, to ensure that the law is not a barrier, but a bridge. Grounded in resilience and curiosity, I'm eager to build on this commitment in law school. Yeah, so that's the very standard kind of boring conclusion. Just tighten it up. Like, it's fine, but it was like 5 sentences. It should be like 2 of like, this made me learn more about law, therefore law school. And you say a lot of things like, build your commitment, build a bridge, all that stuff. All of which is fine, but it doesn't add anything. So I would just tighten it because I'm just like bored as I'm reading it. And if I'm bored, the admissions officers are also bored. And, we're not allowed to say this publicly because like they will never tell you what a bad part of a personal statement is, but these long conclusions that just go on. And I know it's only 5 sentences, but it was 5 sentences that basically all said the same thing, which is like, I want to do law school. You can just get to the point. Brevity is a power. So anyway, verdict, I'd say well above average. Is it perfect? No. Are there amendments? Sure. Well into the 160s though. This is a pretty solid one. So now let's read the feedback that they got from their lawyer friend. So here's what they said. They responded, "Hey, so-and-so," and this is the lawyer. "I read your personal statement. I think for the most part, the sentences and paragraphs are generally well written," which is true. "I found myself admiring your dedication to your work despite the unusual circumstances. I could also see that the experiences could lead you to appreciate legal processes and frameworks." Yeah, I think that's all fair. And actually, like, this person is definitely going to criticize, which I will note is good because you guys do not need being told what's awesome. You need being told what's bad. And a lot of people, your friends, your family, they're so happy. And a lot of people won't criticize your personal statement. You guys need to hear what's bad about it because that's how you get better. You can only sharpen up what is identified as a weak point. So I like this lawyer, as much as I might not love all his advice, it is well-meaning, it is well-intentioned. He is giving you better advice than most bosses will. So anyway, let's continue. Before I go any deeper with detailed comments, however, I would suggest doing another draft that addresses one larger note. I need much more of what is in the last paragraph. That's so funny. I thought your last paragraph was your weakest part. That one paragraph should be expanded and broken up into more paragraphs. No, it shouldn't. It was boring and generic and everyone writes that. And that should be the focal point of the essay. No, it should not. I think this essay contains far too much narrative and not enough analysis and reflection. Well, yeah, because anyone can do analysis and reflection. It's incredibly unpowerful. Anyone can say these things. Facts, which you have that you actually like kept working while you were like on leave and you kicked ass, those are good. Saying like, I want to be a voice for the voiceless or like make a bridge for law. Everyone says that shit. It's so boring. It's also completely powerless because like anyone can say it. So it's well-meaning, but this is bad advice. And then he gives the following questions. Consider the following questions or as opportunities to expand the analysis part. What do you think about working in government? I don't care what you think. I care what you did. So that first question, 0 for 1. Question 2, can you explain in more detail how this internship led to your decision to study law? That was okay because I don't hate it, but also I don't really feel a need for it. Further, I like reframe this as not an internship. Let's make this feel like, don't lie, but let's make it seem like it's a more full-time position. They continue. Did other experiences support that decision? If so, what were they? Yeah, I presume you have other decisions that have drawn you to law school, but you have 2 pages. So I don't know where else you would squeeze in other experiences. So 0 for 3 so far in terms of suggestions. 4, what was your work during this period? Or sorry, was your work during this period on your presentation any different from your work before or after? I mean, once again, we just don't have the room for that. Like, of course it's different. Was this your presentation the only work you did? If so, then of course it's different. But how do you jam pack that all into 2 pages? The answer is you can't. Like, you have to omit things in your personal statement. You just cannot have a comprehensive personal statement because it's 2 pages and you guys have lived 20 some years on planet Earth. So of course you're going to have stuff that doesn't make the cut. So like, I get the intent here, but like you don't get to dump everything. You only get 2 pages. So 0 for 4. 5th question. To what extent did your work delve into legal issues or cause you to interact with lawyers? Yeah, I could hear more on that. So maybe 1 for 5. If you could expand more about like what you actually discovered in your presentation and what you presented to the other employees of this department, that would be good. So that one's decent. 6, in what ways did the work of the RIF survivors rest on legal frameworks? I would just cut that entirely. The other RIF survivors, yeah, I don't know. So 1 for 6. Was this presentation the first time you engaged with legal issues? I don't want to hear if you had like a parking ticket when you were 17. And whether it's first or last does not matter. It can stand on its own. Next, what do you envision in your future as a law student lawyer? What do you want to study? What kind of practice interests you? Nope, don't answer that. Everyone answers that. It's so boring. It's also pure conjecture. No one actually knows. And it's so boring because everyone's like, I want to do X. It's like, okay, cool. And I'm not saying you can't have a sentence on it if that's what really calls you to it, but everyone wants to go to law school. That's why people are applying to law school. It's like to convince them like you have your career thought out is just unneeded. If they had to actually consider if you guys have thought out your careers, no one will get admitted. Because yeah. Anyway, next, how is that vision informed by your past experiences in government or other legal experience? I mean, once again, look, that's fine, but like we just don't have room for it. And then do you want to return to government work? Why? I mean, yeah, if you do want to return to government work and that's why you're going to law school because you want to be a lawyer for a government agency, you should mention that. Otherwise, I wouldn't mention that. Otherwise, it is funny though, because they end by saying you don't have to answer all the questions above. They're just a suggested way. Well, yeah, you can because there's like 10 questions. Each of those would require a paragraph and you only have 2 pages. So of course you can't answer them all. But they continue. They are just suggested ways for this essay to show more of what you think and how you think, much less of what happened during that fateful week. Yeah, it's funny. Because actually, I don't give a shit what you think. Everyone has opinions. Opinions are not powerful. Action is powerful. You showed action. I much prefer action. Action is kicking ass. And what people think, everyone writes about what they think. Further, like I can say all sorts of things. And like I want to be a Supreme Court justice. I find the Fourth Amendment fascinating. Shit like that. It's just not interesting because anyone can say it. And your personal statement is meant to differentiate how you can kick ass, and your actual facts do that. So, short answer, I think he's well-meaning. I think, like, I am glad he gave critique, but I think his critique is ultimately wrong. I really like your personal statement as written. Like, are there edits to be made? Sure. Like, you can make it better. You always can. Is it? It's way better than like what you would have if you answered these questions, though. So, yeah. Well, with that, I'll see you all next week. If you enjoyed what we talked about today or learned something new, please leave a review or a rating. It really does help us out and helps us reach more people. If you have a question or anything you want talked about in the world of LSAT or law school admissions, you can always email support@heyfuturelawyer.com to get it in the podcast agenda. Just put podcast in the subject and we will talk about it on the show. Alrighty, that's all we have for today. So I will see you all next time.